Check, check, check. Here we are. Here we are, guys. It is the Breath Club monthly Q&A. Now, if you're a fan of this channel, you know that I would say for the last 6 months, I have not been doing a lot of YouTube lives. Most of the time, I've just done one per month. In the old days, in the days that I will return to as soon as I possibly can, I used to do YouTube lives every single Friday afternoon. And those days will return, my friends. But right now is a crazy time. Let me tell you why it's a crazy time. Let me tell you why. I've got a few visual aids to demonstrate why these last few months have been so crazy. One is this book. Oh my God, here it is, The Language of Breath. Let me tell you guys, if you haven't already pre-ordered it, you can pre-order it from anywhere. So this is not a self-published. My first book, actually, today is the 3-year anniversary of the publishing of this book, A Practical Guide to Breathwork. This is the book that I wrote in 2020, published in 2020. It's the book that, the whole reason I wrote it was the book that I wish existed, but it didn't exist at the time. And it's actually the book that I wished would have existed when I started down the road of breathwork years ago. So I started breathwork in about 2013-ish, somewhere around there. And for some of you guys who may or may not know this, I'm not going to go down my entire history, but I've always suffered from a lot of social anxiety, from rumination, from just overall a lot of what is all human beings suffer from. Okay. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I had it worse than everybody else, but like everybody else, I would say, like most of us, I didn't completely understand what was going on. And that's actually, I think, at the root of much of the problem. So breath work was a huge, huge life-changing thing for me. And whenever I started down the path of breath work, I was looking for which is the best breath work technique, right? And I was looking at it in a way that, first of all, I didn't even know what was out there, and I didn't know what to choose from. So what I did is I wrote this book. This was the culmination of me ultimately. I wanted people to understand why, like some of the foundational reasons why breath work works. And I wanted to explain to people sort of my story, where I got into breath work, how certain techniques generally work, some of the history of breath work in the West. The history of breath work in the West is actually a pretty interesting story. And just a quick pause. I am going to get to the questions, my friends. I am going to get to those in just a second. But hey, we only get to do this once a month. Let's open up with a little chit chat. A little bit of chit chat doesn't hurt. but basically, so in A Practical Guide, I go through some of the early breath works in the West, and it started off. In the West, you had things like rebirthing, you had things like liberation breathing, you had things like vivation, holotropic breath work. And those are a lot of, you might have heard a lot about those today. I get people who ask me what I think about those things. And I talk about them in the book. And I also talk about why it is that most people were just so weirded out by these. Okay. And the reality is, there was a very select audience, especially in the early days, for breath work. Like when you look at, if you go on YouTube, now wait, hang out with me. But if you go on YouTube and you search for rebirthing session or holotropic breath work session, and you look at a lot of this, you can see why a lot of people were turned off, because it looks like people are having some kind of like a demon possession or something like that. And so a lot of those things, they colored the way breath work progressed over the years. And so in A Practical Guide to Breathwork, I kind of go over some of this because there's a lot of rumors. There's a lot of things that people generally they have basic beliefs about breathwork to begin with. And so I go over why, some of the foundations as far as what breathwork is working with. I talk about my story. I talk about the history of breathwork. And then the whole second half, the second half of this book is just techniques. So the reason I wrote it is because I wished that someone had already written a book where it's just a whole bunch of techniques. Tell me why these things generally work, what they're generally doing, how to use them, when to use them. And so I do that. That was my first book. But then over the past 3 years, I started to learn an enormous amount. And so I have a complete philosophy of breath work here. So this is a radically different way of looking at not just breath work, but also the human organism as itself. So I'm really proud of it. It's coming out. It was going to be out October 24th. I found out just yesterday. Apparently, the printer made a mistake, and so they have to reprint all of the books. What can you do? Like this one is like what they call a galley copy. So it's like an advanced copy. I've sent these out to advanced readers and things like that. But the actual copies that you'll find in the store, I guess they messed it up. And so now it's going to be coming out October 31st. Yes, my friends. Yes, you can celebrate Halloween reading about a part of yourself that you probably didn't really have a clear understanding of and may have had no idea that even existed at all. That's all in this book, including how to use all breath work. So is it fast and full? Is it like CO2 training? Is it autonomic nervous system protocols? Where is all of this anxiety coming from? What is the biological function of anxiety, of stress, of emotions? What do those things speak? What are you? I mean, there's a lot of questions, and ultimately, that's why this book is not just a technique book. Yes, there's 20 or so techniques that are in this book. So it's not heavy techniques. It's not just a whole bunch of techniques. The goal here is so that, yes, there are techniques there, but no matter what technique you ever practice in the future, it even goes beyond techniques. Okay, it goes beyond breath work, because ultimately, once we start to understand ourselves better, we can start to treat ourselves better. It's just that the vast majority of us, it's just how history has developed. We have a massive misunderstanding as far as what we are as human beings, what our organism is. And so that's what I do. The Language of Breath is not just another breathwork book. Most of what I'm doing in that book is talking about, well, much of what, especially the early part, is the foundation of looking at yourself in a completely different way. So having said that, that's coming out. So I'm super excited about that. We're going to be doing actually a free challenge. So I know whenever a person says, hey, I'm coming out with a breathwork book. Hey, there's this breathwork thing. I'm doing Language of Breath. A lot of people, and I totally understand this, are like, okay, so what's different about it? How is it different from all the other stuff that's out there? So we're going to do a free 3-day challenge. And if you're on the mailing list, you'll find out about that. I'll put stuff up here on YouTube about it too. But we're going to do a 3-day challenge so you can start to experience what this stuff is, and to get a better idea. And hey, we're celebrating the release of this book. It's been, I started this particular book. I started writing the actual book August of last year. So it's been a long time coming. It's gone under, I don't know how many, revisions and edits and updates and all this. And as far as my bibliography, it was some very deep research. So when you make some bold claims, when you make some radical claims, you have to back it up with research. And that's what I did. So the nice thing is, it's coming out. It's just a week late. All right. So it's just a week late. It's not that big a deal. It's coming out. Also, we are taking applications for the Language of Breath Breathworker School. See, this is the actual logo of the Language of Breath. This is the book. So when you get published, you don't really get to decide everything. So they don't necessarily, like, I didn't get to decide what the cover looks like. So if you don't like the cover, I didn't design it. I hope you like the cover. Let me know. What do you think about the cover of this book? It's kind of cool. It's got a cool color to it. I like the text. of it. It was pretty sweet. Let's see who we got on the front. I think this was Jill Miller. Yeah, this is Jill Miller's endorsement. So the book's been endorsed by Jill Miller, Patrick McEwen, Tom Granger, Ben Greenfield. They've all had a chance to read the book. So, hey, if they like it, it can't be that bad, right? Hey, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. I think it looks pretty cool. It's not what I would have done myself. Like, for instance, this book, I designed that. So that is my design. A Practical Guide to Breathwork. I designed a practical guide all by myself. I did not design any of this. But hey, I think they did a pretty good job. They've got it's pretty cool looking book. So thank you, Carly. Hey, good to see you, Moosemans. Hey, happy Tuesday. Today's a really cool day. It is the 3-year anniversary of the release of A Practical Guide to Breathwork, and as a way of celebrating that, we are going to do one of the full sessions of that I have in the back of this book. So in A Practical Guide to Breathwork, if you're part of the Patreon club, I explain how I put together breathing techniques into sessions. Now I've worked on that, and it's more advanced now in the language of breath years. So now we're in the language of breath years. But we're going to be doing one of the sessions that is detailed in the back of this book. So if you like how I do breath work, if you've done any of my sessions, I do have some of my sessions for free on YouTube. If you haven't joined the Breath Club, it's $5 a month. I would challenge you to find a better use of that $5 than joining this Breath Club. In addition to my catalog of over 100 different guided breathwork sessions, every month we get together, and actually we're about to get together at the top of the next hour for a live breathwork session. So I'm going to guide you through a live breathwork session from this book because we're celebrating the 3-year anniversary of it. So that's coming up in about an hour. If you haven't already joined, you can just go to, I think you can go to my landing page. You can go to jessecoomer.com. You can go to Patreon and just look for Midwestern Method. I'm still using that old name. So if you've been with me for a while, you've known I've really progressed. Like you've gotten to see me change. And I'm not embarrassed about that. That, sometimes a person, they feel like they have to stick with the same exact point of view forever. And I want you to know that I'm always still questioning. And I think it's really important to have that kind of humility to say, okay, I'm pretty sure I've got it now. Oh, I'm pretty sure I got it now. I'm pretty sure I got it now. But I am, I'm a former English professor. And one of the things we learn when it comes to teaching people logic, or when teaching people critical thinking is so easy to say. It's easy to say those two words, critical thinking, but it's so difficult to do, honestly. And it's because we have so many cognitive biases. And actually that's something I discuss a lot in the Language of Breath book is ultimately there's more to the human organism than what we consciously are aware of. We have an enormous amount of unconscious Jesse, or unconscious, Chris or Carly or Quillman or Dana or Moosemans. We've got an enormous amount of unconscious us that will color every experience, can really poison the well for us when it comes to learning new things and being open to new ideas. In fact, who was it? I think it was Dr. Timothy Wilson talks about how we have what he calls a third, it's an immune system of the conscious, it's the unconscious immune system. He talks a lot about what we call the adaptive unconscious. A great book that he wrote is called Strangers to Ourselves. It's a fantastic book. I really recommend that. Whenever I read these books about consciousness, I will tell you this. There's so many books out there that it's not like there's there's a lot, I guess, but it's not like there's a lot about like really what's happening with the conscious and the unconscious. So some of my favorite books, and hey, okay, we're going to get into the questions. I've got the questions right here. We've had actually this month, if you're in the Breath Club, I got to admit, I was a little bit late getting the question bar up there. and so I apologize for the lateness of that. And please ask me double the questions next month, because we're actually hopefully starting. My goal, guys, is by the holiday season, November and December, we're going to be doing some really interesting things, by the way. So Language of Breath we're going to start doing some really new and interesting things. And I'll tell you more about those in the future. But let's just say that we're going to do some more community things, some things that I would love to invite you guys to join in the community, because we have ultimately within the Language of Breath Collective, which is all of the certified Language of breath workers. And then beyond that, we really have this great community that's starting to grow. And it's not about control. It's not about, hey, don't eat this way, or you shouldn't think that way. It's ultimately about forming a better relationship with yourself. And that might sound kind of cliche, but forming a better relationship within yourself is you have to look at what you are accurately in order to do that. And that's what the Language of Breath is all about. And Dana says, hey, when will the book be out on Audible? Cool. The good news is now, right now, just so you know, this book is available on Audible. It's on every format. If you go to Amazon, you can get a practical guide to breath work. You go to jessekummer.com, you can get this in every format that there is. Now, this other book, Language of Breath, this one will be out on Halloween. So it'll be out in all formats. So Audible and paperback and ebook, all of those. It'll be out on October 31st. So it was going to be the 24th. Now it's going to be the 31st. I'm okay with it. Like, they were like, hey, Jesse, now here's the thing. I finished the book. I finished writing this book. Like, literally, I haven't done anything but approve edits of like, hey, we like this wording better, or how do you like the header? I haven't done anything like actual writing of this book for about a year, right? So I finished it up. I said, here's the book. You can do edits, you can format it and things. That was about a year ago. So I'm ready for this book to come out. I've been kind of hinting, hey, this is what Language of Breath is all about. But I'm ready for you guys to get to read what this, okay, so insider information. Then we'll get to the questions, I promise. But I don't get to talk to you guys that often. So I've got to do. So the subheader, I got to take a drink. Okay. So the subheader of this book is Discover Better Emotional and Physical Health Through Breathing and Awareness. Now, I had to read that backwards. On my screen. I hope that wasn't bad for you. That was not the title. That was not the subtitle that I chose. This is the subtitle that they chose. My subtitle, which I thought was epically cool and more accurate, is A Unified Philosophy of Breathwork and Self-Awareness. I think that's excellent. I mean, I was really impressed with myself. All good though. When you go with a major publisher, they make some decisions for you. So hey, it is what it is. Hey, guess what? Stranded 360. You are not late. I have not yet gotten to the answering of these questions. I've just been going over stuff. So stick around. We're going to talk about mouth taping here in just a second. There are problems that I'm seeing in the world when it comes to mouth taping. What a great, you know what? We'll just use that as a, what do they call it? What do they call that? It's a transition, I think, right? I recently got a tip that if you can't think of the word, you should say, what do they say? What's the word in English? And it makes you sound like you're smart, that you're maybe bilingual. I am not bilingual. I was an English professor. I have no excuse other than I just forgot the word. Segue. We're going to segue right into it. Let's take a look here. Okay. Let's take a look at these. So the first question I got. So if you are in the Patreon club, I have different tiers. If you're in the silver tier or higher, you can ask me anything you want. And you can ask me to talk about whatever you want me to talk about. Like, I'm not going to just like, if it's something I have no understanding of, it's like, would you talk about Newtonian physics for a half hour? I'm not going to do that. But it doesn't have to be breath work. It can be anything, pretty much anything. So this one, so not too long ago, I made a post, and I don't think I posted it here, but if you follow me on Instagram, I made this post. Everybody was posting about this tennis player, and they were all going on. And of course, the breathwork world was like, "This is the greatest thing ever." James Nestor made the comment that, "Hey, man, this is awesome." We had all these people making comments that it was so great to see, let's see, I'm going to try to find my post so you can take a look. It was so great to see this tennis player mouth taping. Here is my post. All right. So, okay, is anybody a fan of the Three Amigos? See, this post is a perfect post for a very select group of people. Like on the Venn diagram of this kind of post, there's people who are epically huge fans of the Three Amigos movie, and there's people who understand breath work really well. And it's like, there's not many people that really got the post. But basically, everybody was extolling the what's her name? Do you guys let's see? Iga, I can't really pronounce her name. So anyway, professional tennis player. She's mouth taping while she's in practice. Everyone's extolling this. People are bragging about how often they tape their mouth shut when they exercise. And so let's talk about mouth taping. Let's dive into this, because what happens so often is we oversimplify things. And this is, of course, this is at the heart of my book. This is at the heart of much of what I do, is we oversimplify things. Breath work gets oversimplified. Exercise gets oversimplified. We love to just put a Band-Aid on it or mouth tape on it, and then pretend that we don't have to think about any of the complexities of what's actually happening. So let's dive into this, right? So yeah, definitely. There's some CO2 tolerance things that we're going to talk about. Breathing is your primary go-to when it comes to breathing. So I had multiple people ask me about my post. So that's why so it's more than one person. So I'm not reading anybody's individual email to me, just because it was more than one person said, "Hey, I saw your post on Instagram. Could you talk about it some more?" So here's my point. So in the movie The Three Amigos, there's this part where Rusty Bottoms, and you got to remember the Three Amigos, there's just these three morons, and they're just hilarious. And they're in this town in Mexico, and this woman said, "Hey, maybe later on we can take a walk and you can kiss me on the veranda." And Dusty Bottoms turns and he says, "Nah, lips will be fine." and so the thing is, like, when it comes to mouth taping, so for the vast majority, when I have told many of my clients to mouth tape. You'll find it in both of my books. Mouth taping has a place, but ultimately, when it comes to breathing, it should be a conscious thing. And sometimes you'll see a coach that might do some mouth taping, maybe to kind of make a point, to kind of remind that athlete, "Hey, this time we're going to try to maintain nasal breathing only," and just to kind of see how this works. Now, this can be something that it's not necessarily a bad thing to do, but when it comes to using, an athlete's overall respiratory capabilities, you want to leave more options. So when I train athletes, and generally people who I highly respect, when they're training athletes with breath training, yes, you might say, okay, if you're a mouth breather at night, go ahead and mouth tape. I would say check with a myofunctional therapist first, just to make sure you don't have any major blockages. There is a reason why we breathe through the mouth. Like, there is a reason why it's possible to breathe through the mouth, and that is because it's a kind of what we call maybe an escape hatch. Have you ever tried swimming and actually swimming and doing nasal breathing while swimming? There are times when it's appropriate to mouth breathe. And there is even a time that's appropriate to mouth breathe when you're exercising. And a lot of breath people who have a cursory knowledge of how this works might say, "No, there's never a time." I will say this: I can get an athlete sprinting and they're nasal breathing. Okay, I've gotten mixed martial artists doing heavy duty. In this case, it was jujitsu. So they were rolling, nasal breathing only, right? So I want to just stress that nasal breathing is primarily going to be the most optimal place for your breathing. Yes, throughout. But that's where a lot of times we say, "Well, I think I've heard enough. I'm not going to think about it anymore." But there are times whenever it's appropriate to exhale through the mouth, and even whenever it's appropriate to inhale and exhale through the mouth. Now, I detail that in this book that's coming out, and I think I talk about it in a practical guide. When you write these books, okay, so let me just say, when you write these books, sometimes you forget, did I talk about it in that book? But basically, the way I like to train, and this is something that you'll see other elite, like, and when I say other, I don't mean I'm so elite. So most of what I do is I train people in breath. I'm not training a lot of athletes. I do train some athletes, but most of it I'm teaching military. I'm teaching first responders. Tomorrow, let's see, this weekend I'm going to be teaching doing breath at hospice. Tomorrow I'm going to be doing my rounds in the recovery, so drug addiction recovery clinics. So I do a lot more in these areas, but I do train athletes sometimes. And the thing that you have to understand is there comes a time when it is appropriate to ventilate a little bit more than what the nose can do. So nasal passages are going to provide about 50% of what the mouth can do. There comes a time when I teach the gear system. So if you're familiar with Brian McKenzie, by the way, Brian McKenzie, anybody familiar with him? He's the guy who wrote the foreword to my book. How many times am I going to show you this book? Okay, I'm starting to feel like it's an infomercial. I'm not really trying to do that. So I apologize. But hey, I wrote a book. I'm proud of it. So anyways, so he does a lot of this kind of training. So there comes a time whenever you've gone at your peak and you've gone nasal as long as you can go, and you are producing now a lot more CO2, and there is a pH shift. You're becoming more acidic. And what that does is it can get complex, but what you need to do to balance that, to bring yourself back into a closer homeostatic state, you need to start exhaling more CO2, very simply put. And you can do that one of two ways. You can breathe faster, but eventually you're breathing as fast as you can breathe nasally. So then you need to start exhaling a little bit more. And that's mouth breathing, right? So we're exhaling through the mouth. We still want to try to stay nasal as much as we can on the inhale. And this is because it activates the diaphragm more effectively. It's going to filter your air. It's going to, you're going to get nitric oxide. There's a lot of the benefits that a lot of people probably already understand, but you do need to understand that that pH is what you're trying to work with. And we're not talking about, we're not saying like this is something you want to go to real quickly. The average athlete starts breathing through the mouth as soon as they start going faster than walking pace, right? And that, yes, stop it. You can breathe through your nose. But there comes a time when it is appropriate to exhale through your mouth. There comes a time, yes, there does come a time for some athletes, not for all athletes, not for all like situations, but there are certain situations where mouth breathing 100% is appropriate, that the negative effects of mouth breathing will not outweigh the positive effects of offloading that higher level of CO2 in those moments. So having said that, whenever we just throw an athlete out there and we mouth tape them, you're limiting their options. Not to mention, I guess they have to take off their mouth tape every time they need to take a drink of water. There's a lot of issues that I just personally, I don't understand unless you're just trying to make a point. Hey, for this practice, I know it's really difficult. Like, for instance, if the athlete just can't seem to consciously control that urge to breathe through the mouth, it's like, man, I've been trying to tell you, you got to breathe through the mouth. We've been doing all this training, you got to breathe through your nose. You got to stop mouth breathing so fast. We're just taping it shut, right? You're going to do something like that as a coach. I get that. But I don't want to see a person competing that way. I wouldn't want to see a person training that way very often. At least, maybe one or two times just to kind of get the ball rolling. But ultimately, you need to learn how to breathe. That's the more like foundational thing. How to breathe. When is it appropriate to breathe in the three gears? That's how I would coach. And that's how I do coach athletes. You have to understand when to do that. Now night breathing, nighttime, it's different because you're unconscious. You're asleep, right? So there's no way for you to say, well, am I breathing through the nose, right? Because you're asleep. And even if you're, I don't know, even if you're, even if you're just like, what is it? If you're having like a dream, I guess. You can't. you can't determine how you breathe when you're asleep. I get that. So in that case, taping your mouth shut can be very, appropriate. I think it's very appropriate. Now, having even said that, I would not mouth tape children until, like, for instance, my son is a crazy mouth breather at night. And he knows. I mean, you don't grow up around Jesse Coomer. Yeah, like your dad, when your dad does this for a living, like I remember whenever he was like 3 or 4 years old, we were at some, I forget, like a park or something like that. And he turned to me and he said, Daddy, that guy's he's breathing through the mouth. And he was like, he thought it was so weird. And of course, my heart was warmed. And so I was so proud of my son. I was like, we don't talk about other people, though. We don't want to judge. so, but when it comes down to, okay, he was mouth breathing at night. He started to have some of the purple under the eyes, some of the things that were like, really like, okay, you've got this issue. We need to adjust. We need to do something. I took him to a myofunctional therapist just to make sure I wasn't going to smother the boy. And what they do is they ensure that all the passageways for breathing, that they actually do exist, that they're not going to fail. But one easy way, I will say, if and this is another thing we also did, is we got the tape that goes around the mouth. It's not the tape that actually seals the lips shut. It's the tape that it kind of reinforces just to keep your mouth shut. And we practiced it during the day when he was awake, just to make sure there were no issues. Don't want to smother my son. We practiced for about 30 minutes a day for 3 days. And then, it was one of those things where, okay, great. Now we're going to try doing this at night. And he was really kind of reluctant. He didn't really like it. But he did it, and we made it into a game. You have to make it into a game for kids. Like everything has to be a game. And I gotta say, if it's a game, I kind of like it too, right? I I prefer if it's fun. I'm having more fun. And so what we did is we made it into a game, and then he started mouth taping at night. Now there's some nights where he will just protest and he doesn't want to do it, and I don't ever force him to do it. I encourage him strongly as his father. But, if he's just like, Daddy, I just don't want to do it tonight, I'm not going to sit here and be like, come here, boy. I think you do more harm than good when you force kids into anything, other than, I guess, decent and moral behavior, right? So if he's taking a knife to school, I probably would force him not to. But there's I don't want him to learn to hate the practice. So it is something that I always lovingly encourage. And a lot of times there's a carrot at the end. Okay, if you wake up and you still have your mouth tape on, you get to have one of Daddy's protein bars or whatever. Okay, so I have some protein bars that are not like insanely bad for you that he likes. So I was, okay, here, you can have one of these. Or there's sometimes I have to put a little carrot at the end of the stick. But for the vast majority of the time, because we make it into a game and it's become a sort of a routine, he's able to do that without any big problems. And because it goes around the lips, I don't feel like there's ever going to be an issue. And we also got it checked out with I just wanted to make sure before I got into doing that, myofunctional therapist. Now, for grown-ups, you don't probably need to worry about that quite as much. But what you should do is make sure you can actually breathe through your nose. And a lot of people don't think they can. And so so what I suggest to do is zone 2 cardio while nasal breathing. And zone 2 cardio is the easy cardio. That's the stuff where, it's a brisk walk. Do zone 2 cardio for about 30 minutes, nasal breathing only. And if you do that like 3 to 5 days a week, you'll be breathing through your nose pretty comfortably and not a lot of time. A lot of people do breath work, mouth breathing. A lot of people do breath work in through the nose, out through the mouth. I used to do both. All right. And if you're a fan of my channel, and again, you've seen me grow. Like I started this channel back whenever I was convinced there was just one basic, method of being, and one way, and I was super into one way of thinking. And but I was so infatuated, I was so just completely enthralled with all of this that I couldn't stop learning. And then you grow, you develop, you start to understand things, you start putting things together. And then eventually, if you research and you work hard enough and you've got an enormous amount of experience, which I accumulated over the years, you start to say, okay, I think I have an original idea, or at least some kind of an idea. I'm going to put these things together in a way that I think is more beneficial. And so that's where I am. And so that's how that happened. But when it comes to mouth taping, here's the thing. It's more complex than just breathe through your nose. It's kind of like, I'm just going to finish this little talk with just saying, it's kind of like when people say about exercise, just get out there and start moving more. Okay, that's better than not moving at all. And if I were to say, try to breathe through your nose more, right? Try to always breathe through your nose. That's better than breathing through your mouth. But there's nuance to it, there's complexity to it. It's not as simple as only breathe through your nose and never breathe through your mouth ever. In athletic pursuits, there are definitely instances where you're going to breathe through your mouth. I am exhaling through my mouth a lot right now, right? In order to speak, you have to exhale through your mouth. And there's there was really solid research to show if you inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth, that you will start to make, what is it? How does that, I forget exactly how they talked about it, but basically your nose gets stuffed up. And it happens whenever I do a lot of public speaking. When I do these, I try to make sure to inhale through the nose. I always want to, you'll notice that I'm trying to always do that. Like wherever I go, I'm always trying to inhale through my nose at least. But if I'm talking a lot, I start to notice I get some sinus, I get a little stuffed up. And that is something that's been documented. It just happens. So if you really, especially in breath work, I get all my breath workers in. We're doing circular breath, we're doing super ventilation, we're doing breath holds, we're doing all these different styles that make you get all this bliss. You're going to find that if you can start learning how to do this all nasal, the experience is way better. In the language of breath, that's the main focus. Or not the main focus. It's one of our core things that we really shoot for is, I don't care if you're doing slow, controlled breathing or if you're doing really active breathing. I mean, you're getting in and out through the nose. And if you're part of the Patreon club this month, I share a practice that I've been kind of just messing with for the past 3 weeks. That should be up right now. So it's called, Heavenly. No, this one's called Harvest. Oh, dude, I've got to say, if you haven't done it, if you're in the breath club, definitely do it. Let me know what you think, because it's pretty awesome, in my opinion. In my humble opinion, I think it's a pretty awesome session. And that's why, I was like, all right, I've got to share this. So I've been doing it for about, like I said, I've been doing it for about 3 weeks off and on, and I've just really been enjoying it. And so I wanted to share that. All right, let's see. Second question. Oh, okay, awesome. And I'm seeing some questions here. I'll try to get back to this here in a minute. I do want to get to everybody who is at the silver level or higher first. Yeah, because and then I'll, if there's a little follow-up questions on these things, I'm very happy to answer follow-up questions. If you always want to make sure that your questions are answered, check out the Patreon club at the silver level or higher. You can ask me anything and I'll talk. Like last month, it was, I think Yoshida asked me, just talk about humming and breath work. Didn't even have a specific question, just talk about that. And if you just have a topic, you're like, hey, just talk about this. If you're in those tiers, I'll just do it. And I mean, like I said, unless it's like something I have no business talking about, but I'll do a lot of reaching, I promise. Okay, so the next one was supplements to improve breathing. So I had a couple people, and occasionally I get this question: are there supplements out there that will improve my breathwork practice? And that's how there's 2 questions that came in this month about this. And it's funny how these things are like, there's seasons. And I think it's especially right now. Now, I don't know where you guys live, but in the Midwest right now, it is late summer, early fall. September is when we start to see the changing of the leaves. And if you live in an agricultural area, you're starting to breathe in like an enormous amount of junk. This is especially a time whenever we want to nasally breathe. Okay. You don't have to, you don't have to tape your lips shut all throughout the day. Just remember, hey, I control my lips, right? So, um, so you really want to make sure to do that. But I do get questions. Are there any supplements I can take to improve my breathing practice? So the question is, um, first of all, when we think about supplements, these are the low hanging fruits, and oftentimes low hanging fruits don't have a huge impact. So while there are some supplements that I will recommend, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's going to be a huge game changer. I will let you know that these are things that I typically take on a regular basis, and they're for respiratory health as well as just general health, right? So if you want to jot these down, these are the things that I take, and that I would recommend if you were my friend or my family or whatever. I have a lot of friends who take these as well. So, but as for me, I do take fish oil. So one of the things that we have to understand is the inflammation just in general can creep up, and it's something that the more inflammation you have, the more difficult it's going to be, especially around these tissues. So especially this time of year when I tend to get this question, I say, listen, they're like, man, I'm having a hard time with nasal breathing, or it's probably that you have some inflammation that's kind of gunking things up. Um, and that's totally normal. It's not like the thing is sometimes in this breathwork world or in this like health and human performance world, people even feel guilty. It's like, I can't believe it. I do all this breath work. I do all these cold showers and sauna and all these things. I can't believe it. Don't feel guilty. You are a human being. Okay. The most important thing is to be honest. So, okay, I have some extra inflammation. Well, okay. So fish oil is a great one. And then in combination, I generally would recommend to take some turmeric. Now, these are supplements, as with anything that you're going to put into your body. Definitely ask your healthcare professional. I am not giving you medical advice, but these are two things that generally work well together. And the things that I typically take, especially whenever I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing this time of year. Cold showers and cold therapy are fantastic to help combat inflammation, but inflammation can still creep up. So those are things that I do year round, but especially during this time of year. Actually, I don't typically take turmeric except for this time of year. So that's, I guess, a caveat. So I generally will take some fish oil, but I generally only take turmeric this time of year. Am I taking shots of cod liver oil, Rusty? What a legend. I'm I have a whole freezer full of cod fish, and I don't even thaw them out. Like, I just have like a codfish sickle, and I just kind of like it's good for your teeth, maybe. Maybe that's. Oh man. So okay, so having said that, those are two that I recommend. Another one that I really like, and one that is really good for a lot of things, not just your respiratory system, but it's been shown to improve respiratory health and improve your immune system dramatically, is N-acetylcysteine. So also a lot of times we just know it as NAC. Um, N-acetylcysteine, it's a supplement that I take generally as a maintenance dose. I'll take 600 milligrams a day. Now, the biohackers out there, and here's the thing. So I do take I take a lot of supplements, and I do have every intention of living to a long old life. The concept of dying young, as old as I can do that. That's my goal. I'm not trying to I'm not going to go to the extent that I can't live now, right? So I see sometimes a lot of biohackers doing that, and it's like, dude, why would you want to live forever if the only thing you do is things to help you live forever? Unless you just really enjoy those activities. If it's going to kill me to have a pizza now and then or a beer with a friend, I will happily be mortal. But NAC has been shown to improve the production of glutathione in your liver. Glutathione is a very potent antioxidant. It's just incredibly powerful. Um, Now, sometimes, most of the time, I will see 1,800 milligrams is what a lot of the biohackers use. And during cold and flu season, I will bump it up to 1,800 milligrams. I do a maintenance dose of 600 milligrams per day. And I take that first thing in the morning with my fish oil. And in the fall and spring, I'll take the turmeric. So those are very important to me. Those are the things that I personally say I'm taking these to improve my overall respiratory health. But when it comes down to it, what you're doing with the rest of your day, how you live your life, those things are really going to be the biggest things that are going to come into play. So your diet, are you eating a whole bunch of inflammation, inducing foods? Are you getting enough rest? Those things impact you more than any supplement ever could. So I'm just going to throw in there things, if you can, like, sometimes a person will have chamomile tea at the end of the day. I mean, these things that give you a better night's sleep are generally going to help your ability to breathe. So check those out as well, and remember that. And actually, that brings me to my last question. Now, I had a last minute question from Chris. Chris, I hope you're still here. I'm sorry if I waited to the last minute, but Chris he's found out something about himself. So Chris, he found out he has Hashimoto's, which, he's been having some challenges with a lot of his practices, especially with cold training, with high, impacts, like athletics, exercise, things like that, high inflammation, all of these things. And so, sometimes it's like I even replied back to him. I was like, it's nice to know what the problem was, even if it's a diagnosis, even if I know now that there is a problem. It's sometimes nice to at least know that now we know what the problem is. We can start to make adjustments in our life, or, go according to, our doctor's plan or whatever. So these are things that, I hate it for you, Chris, that you had to have a, a diagnosis, but hey, I'm glad that we figured it out. And so let's see, the way he posed this, he said, my question to you, until I get the inflammation down with lifestyle changes and other, with lifestyle changes and with what my functional medicine practitioner prescribed, are there any breathwork practices that you would recommend that would best support my recovery? I will say that I attribute a lot to deepening my practice with the language of breath. Chris completed the course. So if you're curious about the online course that Chris completed, it's at languageofbreathcollective.com, or you can go to jessecoomer.com in my courses section. It's a super, super in-depth course. And it was just updated. So it is really, I'm very, very proud of it. It's underpriced, but I'm very, very proud of it. He said, okay, it was through your program and sessions that I tuned in and could really hear what my unconscious was speaking to me, which led me to persisting in finding a practitioner that had answers for me. Okay. So what he's asking, at least the way I understand it, is what can I do to enhance my recovery? Right. Especially when it comes to breath work. But if there's anything else, he said, he'll take some advice. So first and foremost, actually going back to what I was just talking about, sleep is king. You have to understand that there is nothing that you can do. There is nothing that you can consciously do to heal yourself, other than asking the unconscious to heal you, right? This is a very interesting thing about being a human, and all of medicine is based off of this, and the best medicine will harness it well. We naturally have the ability to heal. You go back to Hippocrates, and he was like, our goal here is, It's not to be a healer. And this is where a lot of coaches, breath workers, big stars, they get this guru syndrome where they are a healer now. No, each of us have the capacity to heal, and what we have to do is learn to get out of the way of that. We have to learn to let that part come up as opposed to blocking that. And so often we want to be active in that, right? And that comes from really a misunderstanding of what we are as an organism. Getting back to the language of breath, getting back to really the biggest direction that I'm going with my practice, with my teaching, with my overall philosophy is that we have this big misunderstanding. So you've already taken the course. Chris, my very best advice to you is to do everything you can to help calm the unconscious down. We understand that what's happening most of the time, whether it is pain, whether it is, in most cases, what we have is the unconscious you needs to feel safe enough to heal. And that means when you're using the language of breath, you're going to listen to what it's saying. You're going to interpret what the unconscious you is saying. But most importantly, you're going to remind the unconscious you that you're safe. So this is where you will use the techniques that you know, and you're going to test that out. Like in the course, I show you how to test not the unconscious is accepting or it's interpreting your signals in the way that you intend. You need to really zero in and be willing to do a lot of sessions that help you to sleep better. Okay. The more you can rest, the more you're getting out of the way of a part of you that's trying to heal. And so there's a saying that I love, and it's that you can't run and heal at the same time. So you can't charge the hill or run away from an enemy and heal at the same time. Technically, it's not necessarily one or the other, but it's almost. Everything's more complicated than just this or that, but it is almost 100%. You can't heal and run at the same time. And I don't mean just like running for exercise. I mean, you need to relax. And I know that that's so easy to say and it's so hard to implement because I understand, dude. I mean, like I was explaining at the beginning of this session here, I've been going 100 miles an hour for months, and my own health and practices and things, they have suffered. There's a lot of gurus out there and a lot of voices out there that make it sound like, man, they just do self-care all day and then they just pop up on the internet and, oh yes, I was in the middle of bliss and I thought I would just say a few things and then I think I'll just go off into bliss land. No, I mean, life is full of struggle and stress, and and if you're doing it right, you're pushing toward a goal, and you're not being stagnant. You're actually doing things with your life. Okay, so there should be things that cause you to feel stress in your life, and I know that might sound weird, but that's something that's the reason why you're feeling that stress. Well, I've got a video coming out about that soon, and I got to get off of here to go do the tribe breath work. So I don't want to go on and on about it, but what you need to do, Chris, is ultimately work on staying as relaxed as you can throughout the day as possible. And that means hearing the voice of the unconscious, because that unconscious you is picking up things, it's giving you messages. You have to be really attentive to those messages. And the more you can rest, the more you can sleep, the more you're going to heal. Okay? We have to get out of our own way when it comes to healing, when it comes to recovery. This is true with just about anything. Now, Hashimoto's, there are specific things that you should do, and I'm not going to take the place. You've already got a functional medicine doctor. I would definitely just listen to that person. 100%. Just if you trust that person, listen to that person. But in your breathwork practice, the main thing is learning to listen, be attentive, and allow this beautiful organism that you are to do what it already knows how to do and wants to do. But if it feels like, man, I got to manage all these things on the outside world and I've got all these things I'm worried about and I need to take action, okay, it's not going to be able to do that. Now, we still have to take action. We still have to do the things, right? We still have to accomplish those goals. We still have to pay rent. We still have to feed our families. We still have to. So it would be so great if I could just say, hey, just take a nap at all the time. You've got to do your best to stay chill and to remember that the more you can maximize rest, the better. I would recommend trying to go to bed early if you can. I would try to recommend having an hour before you go to bed dedicated to at least keeping the unconscious at bay. And that can be something as simple as making a worry list, right? Getting all the things that you're worried about on a piece of paper so that you don't have to constantly think about them and ruminate them about them all night. That will eliminate somewhat, usually about 90%. It's not going to, nothing's 100% going to remove worries, but doing everything you can to relax. And I wish you the very best, my friend. And you're part of the Breath Tribe, and you're also going to become a certified language of breath worker. So you're stuck with me. I'm just gonna keep on giving you. I'm gonna keep cheering you on. Guys, I have to switch over now to the Zoom for our monthly Breath Tribe breath party. So if you're in the Breath Club, go ahead and switch over. The link is in the Patreon club, and I also emailed everybody, so it's in your personal email as well. If you're not in the Breath Club yet, hey, today would be a great time to join. We're about to start together. If you want to breathe with me, we're gonna do one of the practices from this book. Hey, because it's a 3-year anniversary, and we're all about partying here. So thanks so much for being here. I'm going to try to do more of these, and I apologize for not being able to answer any of these follow-up questions. If you're part of the Breath Club and you're in the silver or higher, definitely still reach out with your questions. I'll make sure to answer them next month on next month's YouTube Live. Guys, thanks so much. Big love to all of you. Don't forget to go out there and be kind to one another, right? That never will stop. Always be kind. Choose kindness. All right, let's go breathe.